All right, let's go ahead and jump on, everybody. Hello, good afternoon to everybody in the audience. Hello to all the attendees. We got our panelists logging on. Recordings have been turned on. I am excited. We're about to have a very, very interesting and good, productive, about a good next 55 minutes or so. We're about to jump into some conversation. But before we do that, welcome to TCE's Working While Black. I am your moderator and your host, Christian Teague. I am a career coach with Texas Career Engagement. In my role, I do programming as well as meeting with students, and my liaison affiliations rest with those Black African-American students, fraternity and sorority life students, student athletes, and first generation students. So I'm super excited to be providing this type of programming and content. TCE's aims are diversity, equity, and inclusion, and to make career ed palatable and equitable for all students. So we thrive in doing this type of work. And I'm super excited to be providing this type of insight to students who identify as Black and African American. Oftentimes we like to push our students toward the finish line, but we don't really prepare them for what's to come when they step into those first job roles, or when they've been in the field for a few years and they don't know how to navigate being the only in their field or the only in their office. So we thought that it was very vital to invite some people from different industries, and I'm going to have them introduce themselves in a second, but we thought it was vital to have them hop on and introduce themselves and speak to some of the things. I'm so sorry, my dog is going crazy right now, y'all. Speak to some of the things that they endure in their industry. So I'm going to stop talking, and I would love for you each to introduce yourselves. tell us who you are, where you're from, what you do, and we'll just start there, and then we'll just take the conversation wherever it goes. I got a list of questions, but we're just gonna talk and we're just gonna see what happens. So we'll start with Jay, then we'll go with Nick, and then Q.
I knew he's gonna pick me first. So my name is Jay. I graduated from UT in 2014, and currently I work in the tech industry. I work for a startup, but prior to that, I was at Indeed, and before that, I was at Facebook. So I'm working as an analyst, and also I'm a grad student, juggling both right now. Originally from Houston, and was that everything? That's pretty much, yeah. That's
Yeah, that's pretty much it. We can do that.
What's up, everyone? So my name is Hendricks. So I'm from Lake Jackson, Texas. I graduated from Sam Houston State University with my bachelor's in accounting in 2018, and then let's not do the sign. But and then with my master's of science in accounting in August of 2020. I currently work at Dow Chemical. I'm a maintenance and engineering cost accountant, and yeah, that's a little bit about me.
What's up, everybody? My name is Qy'Darrius Z. I go by Q if you hear people calling me that throughout the webinar. I'm originally from a small town called Lumberton, North Carolina. I did my undergraduate work at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, where I got my degree in psychology, with minors in social economic justice and education. I am currently a master's student as well at Texas State University, studying student affairs and higher education. And I currently work in post-secondary education at Texas State. And I'm the founder of a social justice and anti-racism firm called McEachern Speaks, as you'll see the @ name on my title. So yeah, that's the work that I do. I do work in education, and I'm an entrepreneur. So that's the perspective I'll be talking from today.
I love it. So as you can see, we have very different viewpoints and expertise on the line right now. So I would love to just dive right into this. So the first question I want to ask, as it pertains to your field, what is something challenging about being Black? And if you could provide any examples to that, that would be helpful too.
Yeah, I'll start.
Any order, yeah.
In the tech industry, I would say the most challenging thing is like there's not a lot of us. And which you would think, coming from UT, it's like, oh, there's not a lot of Black students at UT. And then to also have that in a workplace, and then it's not just the company, it's just the industry, right? So that can be really challenging because you're trying to like find your people, do your job, have someone to relate to, like just small things like that. So I would say, in the tech industry, that's the most challenging part, is just not seeing yourself, one, and not seeing other people like you once you're there.
Yeah, I'll definitely piggyback off that. I mean, that's kind of the same in the accounting world as well. There's just not a lot of representation. And so whenever you have an issue or wherever you have a problem or you just want to kind of vent or talk to somebody, you kind of want to talk to somebody that looks like you. And so just in general, like she said, it's just kind of tough sometimes trying to find somebody. At least, you might have a peer or two, but as far as kind of looking up, as far as like executive leadership or even a little bit under that, it's kind of tough to, address some of the problems or issues that you might have because you kind of don't know who has your back or who doesn't. So I would say, 9 times out of 10, the people who look like us are going to, help us out, and stuff like that. And so I'd say that's kind of the toughest thing as of right now.
I think also too, exactly what they just said, but I think a piece of that also is being the only one. There's an expectation of what you're supposed to look like as a Black person in your field. Now I think that's probably for almost every field at this point, but what am I supposed to look like as a Black man in education? What are those expectations that a lot of people in the offices that I worked in with, even students that I work with, their expectations, okay, I need to be palatable. I can't be passionate. I can't be aggressive. I need to make sure that I come into space as like the most passive person ever because anything that I do may be interpreted as something that I'm not necessarily trying for it to be interpreted as, or it can cause fear, which is just a baseline example, especially working in university life, where you get a lot of students that are coming from high school that have potentially never experienced a Black man working in a administrative position. And that makes it difficult on working with students, but also working with people in the office that haven't experienced working with a Black man like myself. So I think that that is one of the biggest struggles, is almost, I think the word is like stereotype threat of everybody else's assumptions of what you're supposed to be, and how am I supposed to maneuver this space as the only Black man that you might see this entire week.
Right. And then being the only one, and then having to speak for an entire an entire group, right? Like, I'm not only am I the only one, and not only do I have to present myself as like palatable to these people, but I also have to vouch, and I also have to be the voice, like not necessarily quote unquote have to, but I'm expected to, right? Like you're expected to be the voice for every Black man or every Black woman or every Black human in America or in your field. So I feel that like spiritually. So I want to get into a student question. This was submitted by somebody who pre-registered. And I think that this is actually a good segue from where we just came from. Does your race play a factor on how you approach taking criticism from others? And I will go ahead and answer this myself and say that yes, it does. And I think that Q brought that to the table so eloquently when he was talking on the first question, like you never want to seem too aggressive, or you never want to make others uncomfortable. Or I feel like that's not what I try to exude, but I feel like I don't ever want to make people feel uncomfortable or aggressive, or I feel like I'm already naturally viewed that as being a Black male in my field. So because of that, I feel like when I'm giving criticism, I have to like respond a certain way. I have to really think things through. I have to really practice or rehearse what I'm about to say, so I'm not perceived as the angry Black man, or, you know, I have to really like, I have to do a lot more thinking than the average person in my position. So do y'all ever feel like that too?
Yeah, I would say for me, it's more so how you come at me, because I don't care if you're Black, white, orange, green, especially Black. I mean, that's, you know, gray, represent, that's all, you know, all that stuff is fun and games. But you come at me sideways, it's, you know, you're gonna get the same response as I would respond to somebody else. Like all the Black stuff is, you know, it's a respecting at that point. So that's kind of my thing, is I just, as long as you come to me with respect, I don't care how you know, who you are, what you are, whatever, just come to me with respect. But like you said though as well too, it's also very important that that we, you know, we stay poised and we, you know how to take criticism, stuff like that. There's also some self accountability in that factor as well too, and we don't want to be the type of person that, you know, can't take criticism. So I just want to add that as well too. But yeah, as long as you just come correct, we're good. We're a-okay.
Yeah, like I lead with just baseline respect, because at the end of the day, it's a professional setting and it's my work. You know, like if it has nothing to do with my work, then like what is the criticism? You know, did I do my job? What's the issue? And even same with giving criticism, I try to be as direct as possible, but also I don't want to be the angry Black woman. You know, like being assertive is being aggressive. And then on the flip side, if you're too quiet or introvert, like that's an issue. So that balance is hard. But yeah, like I give respect, I expect respect, and anything outside of that, you know, like he said, I don't care what, you know, like I don't care about any of that. Like it's all about respect at the end of the day, because it is a professional setting.
Period. Like respect, period, from top to bottom.
I think also, if I might add, I think that I agree with what everybody said. And I think that an important part, I wrote it down whenever I saw the question, that I think being Black, and especially working in the spaces that I work in with predominantly white people, it affects who I take criticism from, and I take criticism with a grain of salt sometimes as well. And I can kind of explain that. Like, I feel like sometimes the criticism I receive or the praise I receive, whether it's good or bad, is sometimes loaded based on my Blackness. So like I do workshops, speaking engagements, etc., to like do educational trainings. And when I get feedback that's like, oh, you're so eloquent, oh, it was so easy to understand the way you talk about this, I have to take that with a grain of salt, because it's like, okay, my point wasn't to come in here and be like articulate and eloquently. I'm trying to help you understand that these are real issues that we need to address. So that's just like, that's kind of like a broad example, but there's so many points in my career where I've been either criticized or praised for things that have nothing to do with my job performance. And I feel like being a Black person working, I have to understand that, okay, that was something that I can take and learn from and adjust. And that was just something they said because they were insecure about my presence in this space. So that's another thing about criticism. I think it affects the way I receive it, because I have to interpret it to make sure it's actually something that I'm doing wrong or right, and not something that is being projected upon me because I'm Black.
Yeah, and with that, I've been in spaces where I've gotten like direct, like one-on-one feedback from managers or leads, and building up the courage to push back. Like, can you explain this more? Like, whether it's good or bad, because yeah, I've gotten the same, like, oh, like, I love the way that you like presented this, and it was so like, I'm like, okay, what do you mean by that? Like, and what were your expectations? And so that's a part where like, there's times where you take things with a grain of salt. Like I'm like, okay, yeah, thank you, appreciate it. And then there's sometimes like I want you to explain what you meant by this feedback. And then it's like, it's not until you push back at like, oh, okay, yeah, I didn't mean it. I'm like, okay, like I just for clarity, HR does exist. So we need this stuff documented. Thank you.
I love that. I think like sometimes I just want to scream, that's not a compliment. Like that's not a compliment. Like, oh my gosh, you presented that's not a compliment. So yeah, I feel that, especially as somebody who has to like give workshops, like you were saying, somebody who has to give workshops and like speak, in front of people. I don't know if like we're not expected to do well at those things, depending on the field, but I have been in situations like that where people are like, oh my gosh, you do so well. And I'm just like, was I not supposed to? Like, y'all hired me because y'all thought I was gonna like do bad at this. So yeah, I totally understand that. So we know that there are times in our positions where we feel like siloed, or like I said at the beginning, like we're the only ones. Have you ever felt alone in your position as a person who identifies as Black? And if so, how did you combat that? Like, were there any resources? Are you a part of any affinity groups within your organizations? I would love to hear about that.
So for me, my company has things called ERGs, called Employee Resource Groups. And so one that I'm a part of is called GAN. It's called Global African American Network. And so that's been kind of helpful and stuff like that. 'Cause the city that I live in, it's predominantly white, and that's about it. And even my company and my field, as we mentioned earlier, as well too. So I take advantage of that, definitely, and some other employee resource groups and stuff like that as well too. But I'd say that's kind of the best way I kind of handle it, and kind of just experimenting, going out and stuff like that, and just kind of like see more people that look like me and stuff like that. Trying to just trying to get a different feel of the town and stuff like that as well too, and seeing who looks like me and and whatnot, so I can just hang with them and stuff like that. So yeah.
Yeah, those employee resource groups have helped me like a lot, because like we said, in the tech industry, you don't always see yourself. And there's some days back when we were in the office where you would go days without like seeing or interacting with another Black person at work. And being a part of those organizations, when we have events or like different Slack channels, it's a way to get that. And then, it's a Band-Aid, like definitely need to have more representation in these industries. But for the time being, that's how I combat that. It's like, well, let me find the group if it exists and, be as active as I can.
I feel the same. Whenever I moved to Texas, I moved all the way from North Carolina, so I already didn't know anybody. And then I got here and I was like, okay, there's also none of me in this space really. So like the biggest thing was trying to find those people. And I think that affinity groups are one of the best ways to get there. Because I'll also, in every space I've been in, the Black people have found each other. Like that's the best way I can explain that. And like creating that community and that space for everybody to grow and feel comfortable in a space where that they don't like. I don't necessarily feel comfortable all the time at the university large scale. Whenever I'm in my group, I feel good. And I think that that's important for a lot of students that are going into the job force. Is like, once you settle on that job, even beforehand, figure out what spaces are you going to be able to find, what groups are you going to be able to align yourself with, to make sure you don't feel like the only one, even when you are the only one in your team or the only one in your immediate group.
Yeah, and I love the fact that, because I was definitely going to ask a follow-up question specifically to Nick and Q about what that long distance move and how that played a part in, you finding your people essentially. Because, any type of transition is going to be rough. And if you are moving from place to place, I think for me, even moving from institution to institution, I was like, all right, where my people at? Like, I need to find the Black Faculty Student Alliance. I need to find something, even if it's an undergraduate organization that can point me to where all of the full-timers are. So, yeah. Next question. In the event of traumatic experiences that affected your ability to work, and this is a student question, so we're talking about experiences like Trayvon Martin or George Floyd, the countless murders and attacks on the Black community that we have seen play out in the media, especially over the past 2 to 3 years. Has that affected your ability to work in your various fields? And if so, how do you communicate those needs to your higher ups?
If I could go first here, I feel like for me, the answer is yes. There's been many times, not even throughout just this past year, that either something has happened or the news has just gotten to me and I haven't felt like I've been able to be my best self at work, especially this past year. And I think that if you're in an industry or in a field where you're able to interview with your supervisor, or whenever you're looking for a job, you're able to connect with who your supervisor would be. I'm in the mindset of the supervisor is one of the most important aspects of any job that you'll ever be a part of. Because for me, my supervisor has been able to work with me, talk to him and let him know where I'm at. And like, I take time off, I might have to cancel meetings for the day, because I feel like mental health and self-care is the most important thing on top of all else. The work is gonna get done, but I need to make sure that I'm good. And I also think that, for me, this is my personal opinion, but I think that we shouldn't necessarily always have to tell the reasons that we are going through it. So I don't feel like I should always have to disclose that, like, oh my goodness, there was another police killing. I need to talk to my supervisor, tell him exactly how I'm feeling, exactly why I want to take today off, exactly why I need to chill out. I need for people to be receptive, know what's going on in the news, and then also connect with me and be like, are you okay? Do you need time? Because I think it's as much my responsibility to advocate for myself as it is for my supervisor and for my peers to also advocate for me.
Yeah, that's spot on. Like, luckily for me, I've been fortunate enough to work for companies that have been like proactive, one, and two, having unlimited PTO and mental health days. So like a lot of times I don't have to say anything. And it's like, hey, I'm taking this day off. No reason needed. And there's been times where, by the time I get back to the office, our SLT, like our senior leadership, will say something to the company, you know, and it's like, okay, like the whole company is on the same page. Like if I'm putting in PTO, like my boss, like it's already been covered. But it's definitely been times where like I'm at work and something happens and I'm like, I can't even, like I can't concentrate. And it's weird. It's interesting to see like something small, like you come back from the weekend after, you know, something happened and you're hearing your coworkers like, oh yeah, like I did this for a weekend, like I went and I, you know, was on a river walk or, you know, whatever. And it's like, I spent my whole weekend, you know, like home because like I'm dealing with, you know, court ruling, or like I didn't even feel safe going to, you know, these places they are talked about because just last week, da da da. So on that end, like it's kind of like the question before about feeling alone because everyone's experience is different. And so like you're trying to do your work while also dealing with outside work, and you're watching your coworkers just work, you know, and not fully understand like, oh, like this person is dealing with a lot right now. So yeah, that's really tough, especially when something's happening like while you're at work.
First of all, I'm just trying to work where she at. She said I could just say day off. I'm trying to. Y'all hiring? Where's the application? Because wait a minute.
We can.
Man,
I can
that's
email you after this if
hey, say less. But yeah, no, I think a lot of times, like we said, we don't see a lot of us in our what a given field, and just the corporate America just mindset in general. Just a lot of people is work, 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 work. That they eat, breathe, and sleep their job. Like I have somebody I know now, 4 kids, and send emails at 3 a.m. And I'm just like, I don't understand how you do that. I just don't. But they just literally eat, breathe, and sleep their job, and I'm just like, I don't get that. And so a lot of people aren't aware of anything outside of corporate America. Like if it has nothing to do with their job, then that's just that. So kind of like what Q mentioned, you know, like how you should kind of already know what's going on and stuff like that. A lot of people don't, unfortunately. Like a lot of people choose not to know what's going on, or literally just don't know what's going on. So I think it's just I don't know, just very, very unfortunate. And I think it's very important also just you know, kind of see where your company stands with stuff like this as well. Like, do they give out personal statements when stuff like this happens? Like, and what do they say? You know, are people actually coming? Because you know, and like, because tone at the top is very important. Like, if your executives don't really care about anything that's going on in the community, the African American community, then you can kind of probably see what other leadership without in the company, and even your supervisor might feel, or whatever the case might be. So yeah, I just think that's very important as well. It's just kind of seeing where the tone at the top is. Because I think it's important. So
I love that tone at the top. What is the tone at the top? Because that's gonna trickle down. I love it. It's gonna trickle down. So I want to shift gears for a second. And I'll give like a brief story because I feel like I deeply relate with this question. And this was before I got my first full-time job. This is when I was applying for positions and when I was interviewing, but it solely has everything to do with what we're talking about now. I remember texting Q before an interview, and this is when my hair wasn't as long. And I remember texting him like, because he wears twists from time to time as well. And I said, should I take these twists out or should I leave them in? Should I wear my hair back? Should I wear it up? Like, I want to be palatable. I don't want them to see me and be like, no, his hair is unprofessional. How is he interviewing for career services or athletics? And he looks like this. So I was very like on pins and needles about it. And I want to know, have you all ever felt that way about your hair or about your style specifically? Because I, you know, off the clock, I can dress a little bit eccentrically from time to time, but I want to know if your style or the way you wear your hair affects how you show up to work.
Well, you know, I have locks. So the way that I've approached it, honestly, is that if a company doesn't want me how I am, then I don't want to work there. And it's been as simple as that. When I interview, I don't change my hair. I try to be myself as much as possible, because for me, that's the test of like, can I come to work and be myself? Or when I clock in, from 9 to 5, do I have to be someone that I'm not? And then, everyone has their own, limits and what they can handle. But for me, I'm like, I spend most of my time at work and I want to be myself. And that's like, and even like professionalism in a way is rooted in white supremacy anyway. So what does professionalism even mean? Sorry, had to go there, but that's something that since we have students here, you have to think about those things. Like if you have locks, if you have twists, like, is it really worth cutting your hair off or, like for a paycheck? Like, no, for me, it's not. And so when I interview, that's my test. Like, I'm going to go in. I mean, I could, but I'm like, I'm not combing out. Like, there's nothing I can do with my locks. If this is why I don't get the job, then it's not meant for me, period. So.
I think, you about to go, Q? Okay.
You got it, go ahead.
I think for me, I'm probably, I have the, I say like least, I guess, artistic style of hair. I just have like
lies
and a part, but still nonetheless, that's neither here nor there. So, but as far as dressing, no one's even coming close to me in that. So, not in this chat talking about, just in general in my job. But I think one thing that to kind of include as well is just kind of speech. Me and my sister were kind of talking about this as well too, and I feel like for example, like if I say, and it's not the most professional thing is, but like she said earlier, like what is professional? So for example, if I say nah or for show or bet, if someone looks at me differently and like, ooh, he's not as professional. Okay, if I asked you the question, why is nah unprofessional? Can you give me a solid, legit reason on why nah or bet is not unprofessional? Is unprofessional? Like as long as I feel like professionalism is geared towards my job. So as long as I'm producing results, giving everything that I'm supposed to do on time, I go to all my meetings, I'm doing everything that I'm supposed to do, but you're hung up on the nah, just like how she mentioned earlier. Like if you hung up on my hair, like then this job's probably not for me. Like, and again, not saying you should just be totally comfortable and just say whatever you want. I'm definitely not advocating that. But some language might slip out here and there as far as just like that represents my culture. And again, not that I'm trying to just do it all the time, but it just might slip out every now and then. It's like, hopefully no one looks at you kind of differently after that. So, but yeah, just like hair and style, I think speech is kind of important as well too, to kind of intermingle that as well too, and making sure, that people are okay with it and comfortable with it. And yeah.
Yeah, I think that's an important one to add in too, because speech is a big part of quote unquote professionalism. I want to get into professionalism, but I know that's probably for another session, Christian. But I think for me, like, Christian, we had that conversation about hair too, because I have it braided down right now, but I think our hair is about the same length, and it's like, what do I do? And I think I agree with both of y'all. If the job is not going to hire me because my hair is curly, or like because I say nah in a professional space, like, do I want that? I also am one to, I feel like I'm fresh, and like sometimes I wear like a hoodie suit combos or something like that, and that's not necessarily like professional, like a t-shirt and a suit or something like that, or anything that doesn't necessarily align with like what business professional or business casual looks like. Am I going to be challenged for that? So even sometimes whenever I'm in an interview, if it's like a first round interview or something like that, I might test not the limits, but like test to see where your head is at. Because if I'm coming to the interview, I know I'm qualified, I know I'm prepared, I know the talents and the experience I bring, and you're hung up on my hair, that's not the place I want to be. That's not the place that deserves to have what I bring to the table. So students that are here that are thinking about like, should I put my hair up? Should I lay it down? Do I need to cut it off before I start job searching so that I can get that good paying job? Kind of like Jay said, like, am I going to do something with my hair for a check? Am I going to compromise my culture, who I am, for a check? It's a decision you got to make, but the decision for me is an easy no.
Yeah, and I think that those are things you know, like when you're interviewing, like what's the code of conduct? What does professionalism mean for this company? Because like that'll also set the tone. It's like, okay, well, I check all of these boxes, so it can't be my hair, you know, like, because legally, you know, like code of conducts are legally binding. So it's like, okay, like, so what is, like, you just gotta push back and be strong in that area and like comfortable with pushing back on stuff like that.
Like, that's a really good question. I'm gonna write that down too. What is professionalism? What does professionalism look like at your company? I feel like that's something that I would ask in an interview from now on.
No, for real. I'm definitely taking that one with me for whenever the Lord say it's time to go. But I think that, and I'm so glad that Nick, you added that spin to it, because you know, Black culture is so much more than how we look. It's so much more than hair and the colors I wear. It is me responding to you verbally with bet for sure. I got you. Like that's my vernacular. And I try to police that, but I've honestly started to get away from that a lot more, because again, if I'm showing up, if I'm producing excellence, if I'm doing, you know, if I'm doing everything that you're requiring me in my of me in my role, then you shouldn't, like, my culture should not offend you if it's not getting in the way of me doing my job. You know, if it's not getting in the way of what you're paying me to do, then, you know, you really should not be hung up on any of it. So I'm glad that you brought that spin on it, because that's also important too. Like, there are young professionals out there who feel very insecure about that for sure, and that bet, and that I got you, because that's how they were reared up. You know, that's how they were brought up, a lot of them. So thank you for that.
And I mean, African American vernacular, it's a dialect. You know, it's like it's a dialect.
It's a dialect, yes. Like this is a real language. Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to move on. Loving this conversation. So how does your field / your current organization, so where you work now, how do they handle diversity, equity, and inclusion? And I'm asking this in sort of like a policy type of manner, because Jay alluded to this already. Like, you need to be checking those policies. You need to be checking, are there principles in place to back you up? You know, are there things in place that can have your back if something goes left? So how does your current field or your current organization put those things in place? Are there any things that you could like call off the top of your head right now?
Yeah, so we talked a little bit about this earlier about the employee resource groups. So that's one way. And before I like really get into answering this, if you're applying for a role, right, and you look at the company stuff and they say that they value diversity, like you need to be asking these questions. And that will help this, like, is this, you know, performative, like, or is this real? This company, you say you value diversity, inclusion, and equity. Like, can you give me some examples of how this is being implemented, you know, in the company? So that's just background. But yeah, employee resource groups. One of the companies that I worked for, they actually, I don't know if y'all are familiar with like Afrotech. So that's a really big like thing. Like they sent a lot of us to the conference, you know, like to recruit. And then I also found out that they sponsored a lot of Black UT students to go. And that is not a cheap trip. So like things like that, I'm like, okay, like y'all actually putting your money where your mouth is. And in corporate America, like that's how you know they really care. Writing a little blog, putting out a statement is one thing. I'm like, are you like putting money into my community? Yes or no? We got to move on. And then another like great thing that came out was we had a IRG product advisory council. And what that was anytime we rolled out a product or we wanted to put out a statement, there were different representatives from all of our resource groups that had eyes on it. And that's a really big deal because, you know, like in tech, companies are trying to roll out products. Like we got to sell this, we got to get money here. but to have a company take a step back and say like, we need a like inclusive lens on everything that we put out because we don't want to exclude anyone. To me, that was like a really big deal. Like, yeah, you know, I see us at the parade, like this is cool, we marching for MLK, but what do our products look like? You know, like who's having a say so on the money part of this business? But you'll find in tech, I mean, good and bad, like there's some companies, I don't have to name them, where it's like, do you really care? I don't see it. But then on the other hand, there are some companies that are actually like being really proactive and not reactive, where it's like they're not waiting on something to happen. It's like, no, we care about our employees and we care about the communities that they're involved in. And so like we've been saying before, these are things when you're interviewing, you need to ask straight up. What have y'all been doing? You know, like, what are your views on this? How is this being implemented? Do you have resource groups? If not, is there like a space for someone to like create this? You know?
I agree with that a lot. And I think that for the critical part of asking those questions before you get to an institution and asking those questions once you're there is so important, because I think for my field, like post-secondary education, universities, institutions, they look so different all across the country. It's such a big quote unquote industry. So words and like one thing you'll see is like student affairs and universities do a really good job of language. They do a really good job of saying things, but not necessarily following up on those things on the back end. So asking questions of how are you implementing this? What actions are you taking to actually make safer, equitable, more just spaces for students of color, for students with marginalized identities? Because if to answer your question, Christian, initially, like I think that post-secondary education is in a very interesting spot in terms of diversity, equity, and inclusion, because there is like we're listening and learning, we understand, we hear you, but then whenever you look at those policies, rules, regulations in the various offices, they don't reflect that. They're very much ostracizing and disenfranchising primarily Black students at the universities. So if you're a student and you're looking at going into education, whether that is K-12 or post-secondary, it would be very, very important to do the research. And then whenever you see that diversity statement, which you will see, make sure you're going into interviews and asking, how are y'all exemplifying this? What are the actions that correlate with this? Can you tell me a tangible example of when you supported this group of students? All of those things are so important, especially in this industry, because the words are going to be there. It's a matter of if the actions align with those.
Yeah, kind of mixture of both of what both of y'all said. One thing that my company does that I think that was really nice is there's basically this diversity and inclusion initiatives where basically they gave other leaders in the company, African American leaders within the company, to go recruit at HBCUs. So I thought that was pretty big. So for example, I'm on the recruiting team for Southern University, and I was just on a call with them last week, so with some students and stuff like that. So I think that's pretty cool and stuff like that. So taking kind of basically what both of them are saying is that, you know, putting the money where your mouth is. That the saying? Is that the saying? I don't know if that's the saying or not, but you get what I'm saying. But yeah, so you know, you're actually putting a foot forward, you know, towards what you're saying. I think is basically what's important at the end of the day. And following up, because for example, like if you're trying to figure out, you know, why African Americans are leaving your company, and you meet with all the African Americans or whatever, and you're like, okay, we're gonna touch back on this subject, you know, at least once a year, and it's like once a year, like this needs to be something, you know, kind of once every quarter, or maybe low key once a month if possible. You know, it's like, okay, are we just doing this just to kind of check off, you know, the box and saying like, okay, we helped them today, you know, we did what we're supposed to do today, you know, pat on the back, or are you actually trying to make a change? And I think that's just the kind of the difference, and something that I don't want to say you're gonna 100% get out of an interview, but I can definitely say that you're gonna at least get a hint in the direction of how does that company feel when you start asking those questions, and especially if they're like surprised, I'm like, oh shoot, I wasn't expecting to ask any of that question. It's kind of like, okay, well, so you weren't really prepared for that, so how, like, are y'all practicing that? Are y'all doing anything about it? And it's like, if they're not, then they might not be, going in that diversity and inclusion type direction. So
yeah, you got to check that temperature, read that body language when you ask that question, because when you ask, and automatically you get the seat adjustment, and they start shifting their tie.
If they hit one of these, like,
right,
I don't know.
Right, you might want to reevaluate that. And I love that initiative, because y'all are sending you. I'm glad that they asked the African American / Black identifying people.
That was big, bro. That was big. That was the big.
I love that. Like, I love that they asked those people to do the recruiting, because from an employer engagement standpoint, it does not look the best when you have non-Blacks coming to recruit solely Black people. And I know, like, again, it'll always be a discussion of intent versus impact. We know what your intention is, but when you carry it out a certain way, the impact is just kind of lackluster. And it's just like, we know what y'all are intending. We appreciate y'all trying to create room at the table for us, but the way you're going about it is not. It's not. That's not it. So I love the fact that they asked people within the community to lead a charge for the community. Stop doing work for and do work with, right? Like, don't just ask to do this work for me. Include me in the work, because it is essentially for me, right? Love that. And we could talk all day about that, but we're running short on time. I got a couple more questions. So I have a student question, or I have an attendee question I want to get to real quick. Are there some examples when you felt your work environment was really welcoming? So we're shifting gears here to more of like a positive type of antidote. So if you have any stories about when your work environment was very welcoming, and if not, what should have been done to make that work environment more welcoming for you?
So I have two examples. One is short and kind of funny. So I have locks, right? And there was one morning I was rushing to work and I had my like do-rag on, and I didn't realize until like lunchtime, but no one had said anything. And I was like, oh, okay, like, so we good. And it was like, yeah, you had to wrap your hair, I thought. And I was like, say less. Like, I can come here, take my time, or I can just leave it on. And it's like, yeah, you don't have to take it off. I mean, the day's almost over anyway. So I was like, okay, cool. Like, for me, that set the tone, because, hair, important, edges, swoops. And then the second thing is just having the opportunity to go to these conferences. And like, same thing, like, I'm not a recruiter, but I expressed like, hey, I know what y'all like you trying to do. You're going to an event where it's literally nothing but Black people. Let's look at the makeup of the folks that y'all are sending and how this can be perceived. And from there on out, like, even as a non-recruiter, I have been able to travel with the company, for free, to help recruit and just have a good time with my other like Black coworkers, which you don't always find. But also with that, I think that it's important to find a balance, because I'm like, hey, I can do this, but I also don't get paid to do this. Like, I can help you recruit, but that's not my job title. So like, what does compensation look like? What does this mean for me? Is this going to be a part of my bonus, merit, raise, and things like that? So I do want to like make sure I flag that, because it's important to, go to these companies, and it's nice to want to do a lot and be involved and want to give back, but don't let them like pimp you out. Like, they have the money to hire folks to do these things. And if they're going to have you do it, at least get a free trip out of it. I'm like, I'm not paying to go. If you want to send me, you can give me the card, I can expense it, because I know you paying somebody else to do this and they're not doing it.
So note to self, bring Jay back for the POCs and benefits talk. Love it. Got it.
I can go. I think about one of the main things I think about welcoming and a time where I just felt like, dang, I'm in the right place right now. Is I think back to last summer, 2020, whenever George Floyd was murdered. And I came to work and we had a staff meeting that Monday. And I was just like, dang, I don't know how I'm gonna like get through this like business as usual BS, you know? Like we just gotta keep rolling. And my supervisor, he's a white man. We didn't have a staff meeting. We spent the whole meeting debriefing and talking about how we were feeling, what we were going through, and where do we go from here. And that was wild to me because that was honestly like there had been a lot of stuff happen before that while I was working here, while I was an undergrad working, like, but that was the first time that I had a supervisor stop everything, say, no, we're not doing meetings, we're not doing business as usual. We need to talk about this and we need to figure out, are we okay? Because in my staff, I was not the only Black person in my team at that point. And that was also big for us to be able to have that conversation and be raw and authentic and say, I'm mad, I'm upset, I'm frustrated, and not have the expectation that we just need to keep trekking. We just need to keep pushing. Like, that's so sad that that happened, but we got stuff to do. That wasn't the case. And that was the first time that that had ever happened to me in a role. And at that moment, I was like, this is what it feels like to be supported. And this is what I needed right now. If I was going to come to work, then I didn't need to be doing this fraternity sorority life, like stuff that doesn't really matter at the moment. I needed to be figuring out, one, am I okay? How am I navigating this? And also, what are we doing to advocate for people that look like me? And that's one example of where it felt like I was supported in that moment. And that was from a white supervisor. And that's something that I feel like a lot of supervisors need to be attuned or pay attention to, like, especially if you're a white supervisor in a space, what are you doing to support your Black employees? And how are you staying abreast of situations? How are you making sure if something happens in the news that you're either already connecting with your employees or whenever they come in, you're checking on them as soon as they walk in the door? Because for me, that's something that I know in my next job, I'm gonna know that I need because I've received that in this one. And that's just, for me personally, that made me feel like I was welcome in the space and I was welcome to give my raw, real emotions in that moment.
Yeah, that's like having a strong ally, from a higher up. It goes a long way.
Yeah, for me, I make it real quick, man. Yeah, I honestly can't really think of a time where I have just felt like just super welcome. Like it wasn't unwelcome, not like everybody was just coming in like staring at me extra hard or anything like that. But like I guess never like a really just open arms, welcoming feeling. But I guess I'll kind of speak on what Q said. I think it's important to just have supervisors. Like I did have supervisors who definitely looked out and stuff like that. And so that's what made me feel, I guess, more a part of the company. The fact that, okay, we're definitely not the same rank. We're definitely not the same skin tone or anything like that, but you're still looking out for me. So that was probably the most welcoming thing. It wasn't like an initial welcoming type situation, but I definitely had supervisors, just people in general that have kind of transitioned. It was kind of like a transitioning type of welcome. And I think that's just very important within the company. So.
I love that. Thank y'all so much. I have like a question and a half more, but before we do that, I've been reminded to remind all of the attendees that we are going to be launching our exit poll now. So if you could take a couple of minutes to fill that out as we wrap up this wonderful conversation that we have been having for like the past, about 50 minutes or so. Time has gone by extremely fast. I feel like I need a part 2 with y'all. But I do have like 1.5 more questions. So I'm going to quickly get into it. Some people say that they plan to work until like they're dead or until they drop. And that is not sustainable at all, especially for people of color. So what financial advice or priorities do you have like right now to make sure that you are doing less, as you age?
The first thing I did when I graduated and got like my first real job was I got a financial advisor. Um, because like I am a first gen, and at the time, like I think I was like making more than my parents. And it's like, I've never made this amount of money. Nobody in my family really knows, like, all we know checking and savings, but there has to be more. And so just getting as educated as possible. Because also, when you graduate, those student loans are real. They are very real. And when you get 6 months and that's it. And that's not enough. Um, so financially, just staying on top of my finances, I knew that I didn't know. I recognized I didn't know a lot. So I'm like, I need to reach out to someone that knows some that ended up being a UT grad that I just reached out to. He worked in finance. He was a financial planner. Like, hey, I don't know, like if you charge or like, can we just sit down and just help me understand, like, where's this money going? Like, oh, what's a 401k? Do I need an IRA? Like, what do I, things like that. So that would be my advice. If you don't know, find somebody that knows. And once you do that, you also want to stay on top of it. Like, you also don't ever want someone to know more about your money than yourself. So just get as educated as possible. Because yeah, like my plan is to eventually be work optional. Like at some point I need it to be optional that I have to work. It's not a drop to like, I'm not trying to work till I die at all.
Can you repeat the question for me one more time? I was looking at the poll while you were.
I know, right? So basically, what financial advice do you have to ensure that you're not working against yourself, or you're not working until you die?
Oh yeah, then I agree with everything that she just said. Just making sure that you're financially literate, and making sure you're asking those questions, and definitely talk to executive leadership and people. And it doesn't have to be people that just look like you. Whoever whoever you feel comfortable with. Obviously, those people already know what to do. They're working it. Especially if they're making that 6-figure income. It's not just going out. They're watching that. And so like, hey, like what did you do? How did you manage your money and stuff like that? And they'll take you down their path and stuff like that. Because there's a lot of factors that can kind of come into play as far as how much money you kind of get towards the end, or even right now. We'll talk about negotiations another day, but yeah, no, I think just talking to leadership and stuff like that, and talking to people that basically are in the position that you want to be, see what they did.
I'm low-key still a student, so I'm still trying to figure out my financial life. But I feel like for me, one of the best things, I think, Christian, I think you were one of the people that told me this actually, is that I don't want to settle in a position where I'm at. I want to always be looking upward. So in order for me to continue to make more money than I'm making right now, be in a better position than I am right now, I need to be looking forward and not necessarily assuming that I need to stay in this position for a certain amount of time. Especially in student affairs, where people that are familiar with it, there's like almost an expectation of how long you need to be in an entry level, and then how long you need to be in a mid-level role before you go to another level role. But some of the advice I've been given is to move up whenever you are prepared to move up, or reach out whenever you're prepared to reach out to go to the next level. And I think that also goes into being connected with your supervisors, executive leadership, at the institution, to know like, when is it my time to keep going? Because also I'm in a field that does not pay very much. I'm in a field that does not necessarily provide me a lot of the space for like, I always see people saying you need to invest your money, you need to put this much in savings every month. And I'm like, I'm trying to live. Like, I don't have space for that. So if you're going into a field where it's like you don't have the space for like a lot of these things, then upward mobility is also a way for me to like think about, how am I not going to work until I'm 90 years old, So that's kind of where I'm at. That's my perspective at the moment.
I love that. Thank y'all so much. We are right at 4 o'clock. And I am just in awe at the conversation and the dialogue that we have been able to have around just what it's like being us in these fields and in these industries. And I hope that everyone who attended was able to take away some good nuggets, because honestly, if you did not write anything down, or if you were not able to take anything down, I feel bad for you, because there was so much jam-packed in this 55-ish minutes from start to finish. So many good things that were said, so many examples that were shared. So yes, I implore you to find these panelists on LinkedIn, connect with them. Their information has been posted on the UT handshake event. So please go find them. If not, if you can't find them, reach out to me and I will link you to them. And yeah, thank you all for coming to Working While Black. Thank you all for filling out the exit poll. And we will hope to see you all soon.